Welcome to the First Gen American podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Toporek, and I'm a first-generation American. My dad was born in Siberia in 1942 and my mom in Turkey in 1943. I used to be ashamed and embarrassed that my family was different. We spoke different languages. We ate different foods. We were working class in an affluent area of Long Island, New York. In my 20s, through my awakening and journey of self-exploration, I realized how appreciative I needed to be given the sacrifice my parents made to give their children better opportunity. I realized that being first-generation American was more of a superpower than something to be ashamed of. Since then, I celebrated my background, harnessed these values into who I am today, embodying all these qualities into everything I do. In each episode, I'll be interviewing first-generation Americans, helping them tell their stories. I hope you enjoy the show. Please subscribe and like the show, and feel free to send comments or even interviewee suggestions. Thanks for listening.
So my mom came from Guatemala originally, a little town called Ipala in the province of Chiquimula. And she came here probably, I would say, she was in her early 20s at that time. And my dad...
So what brought your mom here?
You know, like what brings many immigrants to America and has for centuries, really, right? The desire to have a better life, to have more opportunity. Conditions in your home country maybe aren't ideal.
Do you know how she got here, like physically?
She is, that's interesting that you asked that. As far as I know, she just flew here. She had a visa to come, and she had, as far as I know, she had a work visa. So she came, I guess what people would call in the legit way, or in the official way, through official channels.
Right.
And she came and wound up staying with, a great, I guess it would be my great uncle. It's my grandmother's first cousin. I've never been great at who's first cousin.
But she had family here.
But yes, she had some family here. That's right.
And so where was here?
Here was Baltimore, the Baltimore area.
Okay.
Yep. And
so a little colder than Guatemala.
Oh, just a little, yeah. The last winter we were there, Jeff, this was 10 years ago. I've been in California for 10 years. The last winter was a 40-inch snowfall in one major storm. So yeah, we're used to a little bit different weather there than here.
So she came here for better opportunity, and
yes, she was she grew up in a town literally with dirt floors, right? My grandmother essentially did kind of odd and end jobs. Her family, my mother's parents owned a very small town that used to have one train line that ran through it, and that was its industry. That's how people came into town. That's how goods came into town.
Right.
To speak of services, there weren't many. Very much an agricultural community in Latin America, middle of the 20th century, right?
So she gets here in her mid-20s, and
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like
did she have the opportunity to have an education in Guatemala?
She had essentially what we would probably call a high school education.
Okay.
Yep. So she hadn't been able. I think she'd maybe gone to some professional schooling in Guatemala City.
Okay.
But nothing that would approximate like a bachelor's, right? So it's just like maybe some additional skill building after high school, but no university.
And so she comes here, and then she's in Baltimore.
Yep.
And what does she start doing then?
She starts doing everything that many immigrants without skills do, which is any job you can take.
Right.
So I remember her telling me stories. She worked at a clothing factory, like a textile factory.
That's actually what my mom did when she first came here.
Yeah, I think it's very common. Obviously, if you look at like the Jewish immigrant story in New York, right? So many people work in textiles and clothing, or anywhere in New England, right? So I remember that was definitely a job she had. She also, as many immigrants do, got into domestic work, right? So housekeeping, nannying,
right?
That type of work, and that really wound up being her career.
And how did she learn the language? I always find it interesting to.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. I imagine, it's funny because we haven't really sat down. It's probably, you hear this a lot as someone who has the opportunity to ask people to tell their stories, and then they kind of realize, oh, maybe I don't know enough about my own story, right? What I remember is that my mom obviously watched, a lot of TV like people do.
My mom learned from soap operas.
Yes. So that plus working with American coworkers, or with coworkers that spoke English already.
Right.
So that helped. She would take public transportation places. So listening to conversations helped. So I think it's an amalgamation of all those things.
Sure.
Right? Kind of the exposure, the immersion, and then the necessity.
Yeah, it's survival mode
Yeah.
of, hand gestures and, trying to figure out what stuff means.
Yep, for sure.
We're not exactly a country that displays things in multiple languages where, we were just in another country and pretty much everything is written in English, and it's a great luxury, but if it's not your native language, it's pretty tough.
It's pretty tough. No, that's right. That's right. I can
And
imagine what her experience must have been like. What anybody's experience is.
it's got to be terrifying. You're on
Yeah.
the subway for the first time, or
Really challenging.
train or bus, and
Yeah.
trying to figure out even where you're going. And
And I think you know that even before you start, right? That you're going to deal with that amount of challenge, that amount of barrier, that amount of stress, that amount of unknown future, and yet so many people still want to come here because of the situations in their own lives.
right, and it's all context.
Yep.
It's the context of what are their conditions and environment that they're leaving behind,
Right.
in order to, because in almost every instance that the leaving behind everything they had in another country is almost 100%.
Yeah.
Where some people left a lot of wealth behind, but some people left nothing and were
Right.
happy to leave nothing behind.
Right. But no matter the situation, wealthy or not, what of course you are leaving behind is a level of familiarity and comfort.
Right.
And so I think the immigrant story, all immigrant stories share a certain amount of hope and optimism.
Yes.
Certainly, but also kind of a bravery that you don't see in your average person, right?
Exactly. It's the bravery, the courage, the adversity. You're just willing to try anything.
Yeah. Like I remember, reading about, and this was probably, 5-10 years ago now, a book came out about the American migration story, how people migrate within our country.
Right.
And that the thesis of the book was essentially that in the 40s, 50s, 60s, essentially the first half of the 20th century, really all the way up to maybe the 80s or 90s, 80s probably, we were a group of people who were brave enough to pick up stakes and go somewhere else for that better job, for the better weather,
Right.
for the whatever it was, right? That it takes a certain mentality, a certain frame of mind to get up and do that. Some people just, I'll just stay in my hometown and I'll live that life.
Stability and security.
Yeah, right. So there's comfort and stability and security there. And yet there are the kinds of people, no matter what the situation is, that will take the risk. And that somehow the book's argument was that we had somehow lost an important bit of risk tolerance that we had in the past. I think immigrants always have a high risk tolerance, right? They're willing to leave comfort and take a risk in the unknown.
And I think that doesn't lose its luster in terms of being passed down. I think you're a great example of it. I'm a great example of it. I don't live where I grew up, and I've lived in multiple cities,
Right?
Just like you have. And,
Yeah.
That sense of adventure and pursuing things.
Yeah. It took me a while I've lived in cities like in a transient fashion, right?
Right.
But it took me a while to really, my move to California was that big move for me.
Right.
Where, I'd really born and grew up in Baltimore. Yeah, I worked transiently in LA or New York, or you studied in Philadelphia for 6 years at the seminary, right? All these different things, and traveled extensively for work and all that kind of stuff. But when I really first picked up everything I had and said, okay, I'm going to, head out to someplace, California was it. And I'm so glad.
Not a bad place.
Not a bad place. Not a bad place.
You're removing better weather.
Yes. Yeah.
Palm trees.
Yeah. No offense to Baltimore, but it's a market improvement for me.
So let's talk about your dad a little bit.
Yeah. So my dad was, that's where I get the crazy last name, right?
Yeah.
12 letters, lots of consonants and vowels in a row.
And how do you actually say it?
So you say, well, right, that's depends on how you come at it.
Right.
If you're Polish and you have that, you say it Wilchowski.
Okay.
But, if you're just a normal person who wants to get to know me, develop a little bit of relationship, you're, in the casual state, you say Wolichowski. So we've anglicized it, we've Americanized it, whatever term you want to use for softening all the hard edges and trying to get it to be, something. It's actually quite phonetic when you look at it, but people get a little flustered by that many letters in a row.
So was he actually from Poland?
No, my grandfather was.
Okay, your grandfather. So he was first generation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my understanding. So my grandfather was from Warsaw. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was from Canada. She was French Canadian, is what I kind of was told in the story. I knew her for some years, but she passed away when I was very young, maybe 4 or 5. So I didn't know her particularly well. But she spoke French, as far as I know, as well as English. And my paternal grandfather was from Warsaw originally, but came over very, very young. So like just past the turn of the century, early 90s.
Right. And so how did they meet? I mean, it's a very interesting combination of
Yeah.
a Polish background and someone from Guatemala.
Yeah. So you're talking about my parents or my grandparents?
Your
my
parents.
Yes. Yeah. So honestly, I've heard different versions of this story. I wish my mom was here. My dad's no longer with us. I wish my mom was here. She could help me out with the story a little. But what I understand is that they met actually out here in California.
Huh.
So she was visiting some family, and he had some, business or some interest that brought him out here, and that they met here, and actually realized funny that my dad had roots in Baltimore, and so did she.
Funny.
Yeah, yeah. And so eventually they were married. As far as I know, they also might have been married in California, but then eventually went back to Baltimore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're back in Baltimore. So that's probably where he had roots and, your mom.
Yes, there's a large Polish community in Baltimore. I used to live in an area in the city called Highlandtown.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's a large community of Polish Americans.
So you were brought up not Jewish.
That's right.
You were brought up, sounds like your mom
It's
was.
interesting. It's a good question. My dad, I guess, was traditionally, they would have been Catholic.
Okay.
He was not particularly practicing, observant. I can't remember. He was only in our lives for a very short time. I'm sure we'll get to that part of the story. But I don't remember him in the years that he was around. There were a couple of years in my very, very early years. And then a couple of years later when they tried to reconcile after a very long separation.
Okay.
But I don't remember him ever saying, hey, let's go to Mass or let's go.
Right.
But I know that when he had 4 other children from a previous marriage, before he had myself and my sister with my mom. And so I know that when that family had life events, a christening would come by, it's at the Catholic Church, or, sadly, a funeral was at the Catholic Church. So that's why I know from some small bit of experience, but not because he drove it, that I believe his family background was Catholic.
And so your mom it sounds like she was a little bit more observant.
She was, at least in the years that I knew her as a mother figure that cared about such things. And what I mean by that is like when you're a young woman, right, and your kids are, infants, I'm not sure what her religious observance, practice, behavior, patterns, ideas were at that time. When I was conscious enough to realize what they were, she was, I would call it, evangelical, right? Like some branch of the Protestant
Right.
Reformation movement, and there's so many, right? That led to so many denominations in Christianity. We went to a church that was part of I believe it was called the Church of the Nazareth movement. That's one kind of, I believe it's an official organization, right? That has churches that belong to it, kind of the way that Judaism has movements and movements align or are official parts of certain movements. So there's the Church of the Nazareth, some other churches, and she kind of floated between different communities. Usually what would happen is that like the core community of people might move from one pastor or one movement to another.
So let's talk about growing up in Baltimore. So
Yeah.
You have a sister. And
Yes.
You have, your family. Like, where are you growing up in Baltimore? And
Yeah.
what is it like growing up in Baltimore as a first generation American?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty tough. Baltimore's,
It's a tough town.
It's a tough town. It's got lots of great things. If anybody from Baltimore winds up hearing this, I want them to know that I have plenty.
I know plenty of people, including one of my partners from Baltimore. So
Yeah, plenty of nice positive memories from having life in Baltimore. But it is a tough town. And so we grew up in some of the tougher parts of town. We grew up in my earliest memory was of having a Section 8 apartment in Dundalk, which was kind of like a working class over the Key Bridge,
And so this is when your parents were together?
They were still together, yes. So
Okay.
my father considered himself a bit of an entrepreneur. So he did everything from, like have stores that sold all sorts of goods, what we might call a dime or dollar store, right?
Right.
Sold like a variety of different cheaper goods that he was buying in bulk and reselling for a small margin. They ran a restaurant together, in some of those early years. I see pictures of myself in it. I have no memories of it, but this is what I've been told. And so in that time, we were either living in city neighborhoods or in this one area, which is just outside the city. So very good. A suburb, but not really. It's really just
Right.
a little enclave of the city, but outside the city limits, called Dundalk. So these are tougher neighborhoods. We grew up in Section 8 housing from the time that I can remember until I was, 11 or 12.
I mean, those are pretty formative years.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, in Section 8 housing, it's a pretty diverse community.
Yep.
So, was it difficult being first generation American, or did you have a lot of other people there that were similar?
I think because of the church community, it felt like I was like many other people, right? It's not until you get into like a school environment per se,
Right.
right? Where and in these areas, these Section 8 housing developments and apartment complexes and so forth and so on. Yes, there are lots of people like you, but it's a tapestry, right? There are people from South America, there are people from Europe, there are people from
Right.
Asia, there are people from all over the world with their own version of the immigrant American story.
Right.
So I would say there was a tapestry of folks in where I lived, where, in the places that we spent each night. But I didn't feel in there, I felt, okay, well, I'm one of, my face might be different or my characteristics might be different, but the family story is kind of similar,
Yeah.
right? Everyone's here is looking for a better life. Everyone's had a collection of strange jobs because either they don't have credentials or the credentials that they had in their country of origin don't really mean so much in the United States.
And they're all trying to figure out a way to get out of Section 8 housing.
Yes. I mean, right, for the most part, everybody's trying to work their way up, right, as we say. And so that felt actually kind of united in those communities that I can remember, right? But in terms of like where I saw my exact story, and so I didn't feel so lonely, meaning a Latin American immigrant story or Latin American origin story, was in my church community, because it was an English Spanish speaking church,
So
but primarily made up of Latin Americans.
Were you brought up with two languages?
Yes. Yeah, I speak Spanish fluently. Not at a university level, because I didn't train at that level.
You're conversant.
Yes, I can navigate any Spanish speaking country without issue. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's a nice little gift that my mom gave me, and my grandmother came over very young because my mom and dad had problems throughout those early years. Very quickly they were separated.
How old were you when they were separated?
I would say I was 4, maybe less. Really young. Really.
And your sister's older or younger?
Younger.
Okay,
So a couple of years. Yeah, so she was
both of you
extremely
were
young.
young.
My grandmother came pretty early on. I was probably. My dad would have told you that was one of the reasons they separated. To be honest with you, because that was always his joke. But my grandmother came to help care for us. My sister wasn't even born. I was probably 9 months or a year old. So she was a big part of our life. As many, again, if you look at the immigrant story, many folks make their way here and then they find a way to help their parents. They find a way to help
Siblings.
my mother, this is where I'm sure we'll get to my dad a little more, but he wasn't around much in her life. But I'll say the one huge positive impact he had was that he and my mom worked together, but really him, because my mom was still, she'd married an American citizen, and yes, she was a citizen, but he had long standing as an American citizen. And
Right.
that was back in the time when you could write a letter as a business owner, which he was, and go, my wife has a brother who needs a sponsor. We're sponsored.
So he continued to do that.
So he did that actually in those early years. So as I was very, very young, my mom brought almost all of her brothers over. So she's one of 6.
And they all came.
4 of those brothers came over.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, and that's thanks to my dad. Again, he's a complicated figure in my life, but I know that myself and everyone, all of my cousins, all of my aunts and uncles who now have made their lives here and retired, and we're able to help their families in Guatemala. We're able to build lives here of meaning and purpose and of material success as well. They were able to do that because someone gave them a chance and some support. That was my dad.
So they separated when you were 4 and your sister was younger. your mom and your grandmother basically raising you.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, really, it sounds like in Section 8 housing until you were 11 or 12.
That's right. Yep. That's right.
And then,
Yep.
and then where do you go from there?
So my mom is a very hard worker. And she, would take multiple jobs, cleaning, nanny, whatever she had to do. At one point, even she tried to go retrain herself in data entry. She would go to the local community college,
Mhm.
take data entry courses.
That's very common.
Yeah.
Yes, they didn't have the education. They're trying to look for some way.
Right. Yeah. Right. And community college will let you in. You don't need that much of a transcript.
That's right.
I believe she actually did get a transcript from Guatemala, funny enough, her high school transcript. But that's all they needed, right? That's the great resource that community college is that door is mostly open to
That's
most
right.
people, which is amazing. So she takes, I can't remember, maybe a year's worth of data entry courses, and gets a job in data entry down in the city for 2 years. So she stops being this domestic worker, and she goes into the city for 2 years during these years that were, between, again, that split up and time that we actually finally move out from Section 8. But she finds the thing that many of us find that wind up taking these jobs or recommuting to the city and the whole thing, right? Like by the time you pay for the commute, and by the time you get down there, the wages aren't exactly particularly great. It's an entry-level data entry job.
And it's a grind.
And it's a grind, right? She can actually make a ton more money doing the domestic work she was doing and be around more.
Right.
So she tries it for a couple of years, but eventually goes back to the stable of her professional skills, which is she's wonderful with kids, and she's fantastic with like order and cleanliness, and she's just great at it. So that's when she makes her life up. She saves a ton of money. Yeah, she really did very much. She takes saves a ton of money, by our standards, and she finally has the ability in the late '80s to buy a house.
Wow.
Yeah.
As a single mother with her mom.
Yeah.
And raising 2 young kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's no small.
It was a big deal. It was a big deal. I mean, like, I gave a sermon about this recently, but like we received like food subsidies when we were kids.
Yeah.
Like that was our life. We'd go collect them, cheese and milk and
That's
all the staples and stuff.
part of surviving.
Yeah, to make it through. So huge day for us when she saves up enough money.
So where do you end up?
So to buy the smallest house in the nicest neighborhood that she can afford.
Very common story.
Very common story, and it happens to be in an all-Jewish neighborhood. What was then the last few years of this neighborhood being an all-Jewish neighborhood.
So I'm guessing that the school district is, for public school, is likely one of the better school districts where she's buying a home there so that you can go to a better.
Exactly. Right. And it was that for a little bit. She didn't know that she was buying into the last few years of that neighborhood, having that kind of better school districts, better opportunities, better quality of
12 years old at this point?
11, I think.
11, okay.
Yeah. And so she, God bless her, she moves us into this house. It's got a yard, it's got a pool, it's got, it's for us, it's quite the upgrade.
So now you're in a more Americanized neighborhood.
Yeah, I would say it was a suburban single home neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
So now how does that transition to, you're in school, I guess it's middle school.
Yep, that's right.
What is it like being a first generation? Do you feel more different at that point or less different or?
I think I feel more different. I don't know if I've just been blind or lucky or both, right? Like over the years, but I guess I never looked at where I came from or, what my story was as particularly a challenge for me, except for a couple of areas where it made me, as you pointed out, we were talking earlier before we sat down, except for when it really stuck out.
Like what?
Right. So like my mom has a heavy accent, still has a heavy accent to this day.
Which you likely never noticed because you're in her home.
Well, I didn't notice it then, but of course, when you meet other people and you start to hang out, you start to have sleepovers and you start to, or, hey, it's a parent-teacher night, right? And all the parents are in the classroom, everybody's introducing themselves. All of a sudden that accent sticks out pretty well, right? It didn't really. So those are the times when I kind of like, now that I realize it, I was a young kid. I should give myself a break, but at the same time, it felt a little weird. Like those are the moments, right? Was
Yeah.
hey, my mom's got a thick accent, or hey, we don't have the resources, right? We're just like barely making it into this house.
Yeah.
We don't have the resources to engage in XYZ social activities, or to just because we can't afford them.
Right. My big dread was coming back from vacation where most people would be tan or have their hair braided from the Caribbean. And they're like, oh, where'd you go? And I'm like, we didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
We went skiing. We did something affordable that, we made fun out of it, which I enjoyed, but I always felt awkward, like they went on all these exotic trips. We didn't.
I think there are two sides to that. One is the financial side, right?
Yeah.
Like it sounds kind of similar, but we just couldn't do those things.
Right.
Right. Like there's no way my mom could. Ocean City was the big thing that everybody used to go to back then, right? Little towns on the shore, 3-hour drive from Baltimore. We just couldn't afford a week's hotel or a week's rental, right? Plus trips to the boardwalk, eating out almost every night, whatever. So what we would do is we'd go for the day, or we'd go for 2 days. That was
Yes,
maybe one overnight, right?
We would go camping.
Yeah, right. You did what you could afford, and
Right.
so certainly that's where I felt different. So I knew the socioeconomics were different to myself and most of my peers. I laugh because my grandmother's been gone now 12 years. I miss her every day, but she spoke no English. Actually, it's not true. She could say "I love you" and like "hello" and "good morning," like one word, little phrases, right? And when I started getting old enough that girls would call the house, in Latin American society, there's certain boundaries about dating and talking, and girls shouldn't be talking to guys at certain ages. And what does it say about the girls? And these are old-fashioned ideas, right, or whatever. But my grandmother was, an old-fashioned lady. She was born in 1921.
Yeah.
So my girls would call the house, and she'd be like, "No está en la casa." Boom. She would hang up, which means he's not at home. I was standing right there, right next to her.
Yeah.
Or I'm downstairs. I'm downstairs in the basement going, "Grandma, stop hanging up with the girls that are calling."
Yeah, there's no way to know who it was.
Oh no, that's right. Yeah, there's no caller ID.
And they're never calling back again if they.
I know. Yeah, that's it. No está en la casa. Boom. Yeah. So those things, right, stuck out to me. Oh,
Yeah.
I know my family communicates a little differently. Oh, we don't have quite the resources that other families have.
Well, and you had the added issue of it's a single parent.
Yes.
Plus
Yes.
your grand-
One of the only single parent households that I can remember in my peer set.
So you're in middle school and now you're kind of going through high school and trying to sort of like find who you are
Yeah, like everyone at that
Yeah,
age, I guess,
at
right?
that age.
Yeah.
Plus you have the added benefit of being a little bit different. So tell us about your academic journey at that point.
I was whenever I had social opportunity, my academics suffered. So like I remember when we moved from Section 8 to the house, that was even worse, it was during the middle of the school year. It wasn't like at the start of a school year. So, so we moved like winter break, and I started 6th grade, that second half of 6th grade in a new school. So for whatever reason, the transition years were always tough for me. So like from 5th to 6th, I would have said I had plenty of friends and felt very well adjusted, and like I had a nice friend set in 5th grade. Same people went to the middle school, but things changed, right? Relationships changed, right? So that year felt to me like a little bit dry from a social perspective. I had excellent grades. So I get into the new school. The second half of 6th grade is a little bit of a wash. I'm new, making friends, whatever. But things start to click by 7th grade. Ton of friends. 8th grade, ton of friends. Grades were worse than A. I had some D's. It was, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, but because what I cared about were I have great friends. I'm now, 12 years old, 13 years old, between 7th and 8th grade. And I'm paying attention to girls and they're paying attention to me.
So this is really so your mom moves to a better neighborhood for you to get a better education and you're out hanging out with your friends.
Absolutely.
I'm curious what her reaction was.
She worked very hard, right? So she always made sure that we had a roof over our heads and enough food to eat, right? That was her focus. But if I bring home that report card that didn't look particularly good too, she was going to be on me about it. So she was, especially in those years.
Right.
in those years, in the middle school years when we first made that transition, she was, in the parent teacher conference and
Because
I did some silly stuff, Jeff. I did some silly stuff, right? Like I was a young kid who like,
7th and 8th grade is like, I've
Yeah.
got 3 boys. That period of especially 7th grade,
Yeah.
I don't know what happens to boys, but they just completely go off the rails.
yeah, I was off the rails. I was there. Like I received a report card that was so atrocious, even to me, that I tried to change the grades with black pen and pass it off to my mother,
Right.
and made some elaborate story up about how the printer had gotten broken and the office staff had
And they
written
had to
grades.
handwrite it. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Good work.
yeah, thanks, appreciate it. So, not one of my brighter moments. I don't usually include that on the rabbinic resume, but there you go. Yeah.
So in high school, do you get your act together?
So again, I have a transition year for whatever reason. Well, in high school, of course, for middle schools feed multiple high schools, right?
Sure.
So I do kind of by natural dispersion, I lose some of the friends that I was close with. They go to all different places, and as I said, that neighborhood that I'm in is changing. So it was called
Jewish neighborhood?
It was a Jewish neighborhood. It was right next to a neighborhood called Pikesville,
Yeah.
which you may or may not know, but
No.
very strong Jewish neighborhood in Baltimore. Reynoldstown was shared a border with Pikesville. And so people started to move. The people that had moved from wherever they were before into Reynoldstown were now moving from Reynoldstown to Pikesville, and Pikesville to Owens Mills. And essentially, right, the kind of migration patterns you see often out of the cities, further and further and further into the counties. And so at high school, I lose a couple of friends to just dispersion to other schools. And I just have a tough social year that year again. Straight A's, yeah. So those transition years seem to be tough for me. Same thing happened in college.
Right.
So that seems to be my pattern. Is that first transition year?
It's pretty normal.
Yeah. When I'm, trying to find my way socially and have the human relationships that make it all worth it and make it worthwhile, or that at least frame a positive experience so that you can have the headspace, and the frame of mind to actually do well.
Right.
Or if you're even luckier, to have a set of friends that themselves care about doing well. And then, right, by spending time with that, right, you gravitate towards that.
So were there any times in high school where you felt different from, your background? Did it stick out more, or was it more in middle school, or did it never, or was it never an issue?
No, it definitely, it was never an issue per se. Like I always felt that I could get around it. There were always those little moments where I was embarrassed of something or other that was different, as I mentioned before.
Right.
So it usually had to do with when my school world collided with my home world.
Two world situation.
Yeah.
And you actually used a phrase that's pretty interesting, like you were able to get around it.
Yeah.
So that means you're constantly navigating the two worlds of you love your home life and having your relationship with your grandmother, and it's warm and you're speaking Spanish and all that.
Right.
The moment you leave that door and go into the American world, having those worlds collide is very challenging.
It is. The moment I would leave the door and walk out into school or life, right, or job or whatever, as I got older through high school and college, I'm a different person in those spaces than I am at home, for sure. And when they collide, it's uncomfortable. So if like in high school, friends wanted to, hey, let's stay at your house tonight. Okay, I've got a really small house. All my friends have really big, nice houses, right? My entire house is, the objects within it, right? There's not a single matching glass or piece of silverware or, all the furniture is secondhand and like everything's a bit of a mess, like because we just don't have resources, right? Kind of stuff, right? So when my friends were over, I had to get around that feeling that, hey, and I probably was being in a way judged, even though my friends I had decent friends. Not a big deal.
Were your friends all American, or did?
I would say almost every one of them was American by a couple of generations, if not more.
Interesting. Yeah. And were they pretty accepting that you were different?
Yeah, some thought it was cool that I spoke Spanish, or something like that. But nobody made a deal of it one way or the other, really. I was the one who felt. They might have thought internally. They might have said to each other, "Oh, George's house is a little bit, a little bit schlubby," or whatever they might have said. But no one said to me, no one made me feel bad. It was my own feelings about that difference that I could see clearly. That
So
our families were very different.
So what did that generate for you internally? Like, because a lot of times that leads to drive toward something.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so from an age when I could finally tell where I had come from and where my mom had gotten us when we got to the single family home. And then as I became friends with folks who had more years on the ground here, right? More generations on the ground here, and they've been able to build up successes, achievements, academic, material, and otherwise. Once you're exposed to that, I think this is probably most people, but certainly for me, you want that, right? You want to be able to think that you can study anything,
Right.
and make it work. You want to be able to think that you might one day have a lovely home and 2 cars in the driveway.
And was that something that was a conversation with your mom or your dad, where they're like, you have to take this opportunity and turn it into something, or were they just sort of quiet about it? Like, yeah, you're going to have to do something here.
They were quiet, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were quiet. It was me. I mean, and I think my mom would back me up here. And my wife has been with me now many years and grew up, we started dating in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So she knows some of that too. I think it was the models around me. So I moved to this neighborhood, it's an all Jewish neighborhood, and I tell the story for other people, but I started going to Shabbat dinners, and then Passover Seders, and then the B'nai Mitzvah tour when I was 13, right? You go to every synagogue on the road.
You're like, it's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Jewish.
No, but I really did think that. I thought to myself, man, Jewish people know what's going on. No, seriously, like, I joke, but it's true that every Jewish family to me was like the family from The Incredibles. They all had the superpowers, like they bless their kids on Friday night with these awesome rituals, with this strange language that I could have sworn was Elvish if someone didn't tell me, because I was a big Lord of the Rings fan. It just like magical words, magical acts. The dads were all well educated and accomplished. The moms also similarly well educated and accomplished, kept beautiful homes. Like the kids had whatever they needed. At least none of that stuff is true the way I'm describing it. Meaning, like,
But it's what you saw.
It's what
What
I saw, right? No family is perfect, right? No,
Yeah.
right? I certainly wasn't the only single parent family. But what I saw in my mind's eye at that time were models that I really wanted for myself.
Right.
Yeah. And to me, Judaism was a part of that model, right? Because at that point I had my mom, who's evangelical, dragging me to church every Sunday. God, I do not like getting up for church, Joe. But like dragging me to church every Sunday to participate. When I was younger, I was into it. But then I got to like 12, 13. I just wanted to be with my friends. Sunday was a day you hung out with your friends. You didn't go to church.
Right.
Right? None of my Jewish friends had to go anywhere on Sunday except for maybe religious school. They got dragged there too.
Well, you didn't have to do that.
Yeah, I didn't do that. But so it was that, like, I thought in my mind at that young age,
This is what you
Judaism's fantastic. It produces good families, whole families, really.
Right.
So my dad was a character, and if we get into it, we'll get into it, but he wasn't a particularly positive influence on my life, except for what he taught me not to be. And what I saw in Jewish families, again, with innocent eyes of a very young person, was families that were whole, working together, striving to make meaning, build relationships, cared about those relationships. And some of those families took me in and really, really not adopted me, right? But like,
there was mentoring.
There was mentoring. I would show up like, George, just take anything out of the fridge you want. It's fine. One finally even George called me mom. It was
No, that's
it's such deep impact for me. Such deep impact that these families.
And look, whether your mom did it deliberately or not, putting you in that environment, you're just surrounded by something that gave you a positive outlook of what you wanted to emulate.
Yeah.
And, that's part of the journey, right? Where
That's right.
It puts you in that place where you saw what it is that you wanted.
Yeah.
And when did your dad come back into your life?
He came back into our life for 2 years. You know, so really I say that he was only with us for 2 years because the years that he was with us before, I have almost no memory of, right? I was like 4 years old when they split.
Right, of course.
So I do remember, not to speak ill of those that have passed, but I do remember he had substance abuse problems. And he could be a violent person, not to other people, but um, like violent to things, right? Like throw things and break things, a yeller, like that kind of person. So they tried to make it. I'm not sure what my mom was up to or what she was thinking. And they tried to make it work. My last, I feel like this would have been maybe middle of high school, like somewhere between 10th and
Oh, that's
12th
a
grade.
tough time.
Weird. The whole thing
Yeah.
was very strange. Yeah. And they, you know, we had gone to visit him at some point where he was living.
He was still living in Baltimore.
Oh, he lived all over the place. In Texas, he lived.
Oh, wow.
So he lived all over the place, but he could come back to the Baltimore area, and somehow they decided to give this reconciliation a shot. Lasted 2 years. It was a complete disaster.
And so he's living with you at the time in the house
Yes,
while you're in high school. I mean, that's pretty disruptive,
it is.
especially for a male to were there situations where you're trying to feel like you're protecting your mom and things like that, or
Again, he was never physically violent to another person, but he was an angry personality. So yeah, those were not great years. When he was in the home, those were not great years. Where my mom was tough. Like my mom,
Yeah.
could protect herself when it comes to an argument. So, but it was a loud and volatile house in those years.
Mhm.
Luckily, it only lasted a couple of years, and that was it. But yeah.
So it sounds like your mom and your grandmother were very strong women, and
They were, yeah, or they are. My mom is. My grandmother was. Yeah, strict.
Yeah.
Strict. And certainly we had our moments of disagreement, especially as I was in my teenage years. We had some pretty big disagreements, but feel very blessed to have had both of them in my life.
so at some point you decide you're going to go to college.
Yeah.
So
Really
that has to work out,
Yeah.
especially with your yo-yo grades.
Yeah. Well, so again, like once I get settled socially, I tend to do okay. So I got straight A's in freshman year, then got popular again sophomore year, horrible. Sophomore, junior year were not great, even though I kind of pulled out junior year with, maybe a B, C average. It wasn't like impressive, but anyway. At the same time, I started dating a wonderful girl who's now my wife
That's amazing.
when I was a junior, and Jewish. The family was divorced, but parents had a pretty decent relationship. Eventually, there was a wonderful stepmom involved as her father remarried, who's now like to us like a mother. She's just this amazing, amazing person. So I had really good models in the family, and I'd been interested in Judaism for a long time, and my father-in-law ran a synagogue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was executive director of a big synagogue, and so that kept me in and around the Jewish world as well. And for my wife's one of these funny people. You go to religious school, there are two types of people, right? The people that get dragged, that's the
Right.
vast majority of people, standard experience for the most part. And then the one person who, like, if they gave out a valedictorian, it would be that person. My wife is that person. My wife is, is the person who loves Jewish studies. She wound up getting a master's in Jewish education years later. She loves Jewish culture, Jewish life. It's meant a lot to her. Everything about the civilization she really admires and invests in. And so, anyway, we started dating, and really, her family, plus some of the friends that I've told you about, so those families, plus the fact that her family kind of threaded me and weaved me into the synagogue community, even though I wasn't Jewish. I built the synagogue's first computer labs and all this stuff because I was into computers. I was coming up. All those influences told me, okay, I want to go to college and I need to start doing better at school. So I did both those things in the other way around, right? I started doing better in school, and eventually I got into Loyola in Baltimore.
Okay.
It's a pretty good college.
Yeah.
I even got a little bit of a ride to go. So that was helpful. And so that's where I actually started my college career. But very quickly got into Loyola, transition year, grades tanked. Had some hangouts and some experience, but actually not that much social experience you would expect. I was a commuter student. So, tell me if all of this is too much detail.
No.
But my sister got pregnant very young. So she was 2 years younger than me, got pregnant in high school. And so we had family stuff going on. I didn't feel like I could really go live on campus.
No, I mean, that's a very big event.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you're talking about it, your grandmother would, be swatting girls away calling. I'm sure that was a pretty traumatic.
Very
family
traumatic for us,
experience.
right? And you can imagine, again, Latin family, how they feel about premarital relations, all that kind of stuff, right? So, like, the stigma on young women who get pregnant early in our society in general, but certainly in kind of a more traditional
Yeah.
patriarchal community like many Latin American communities can be, or where they come from, where they've come from in the past. So yes, that was also very, very tough to navigate. And I thought there's no way I could go away really and be a responsible part of this family. And
Well,
so-
that's, I mean, you're playing the fatherly figure, being, almost the patriarch role within your family as your father.
well, to some degree, yeah, to some degree.
You're feeling some.
Yeah, I am feeling it. I'm not sure my sister would define it or describe it that way, but I'm certainly feeling some inside me personally,
Right.
some feelings where I need to be around.
Right.
So I stick around. I go to local colleges. So I went to Loyola. Didn't do particularly well. Got a C average. Just didn't do great. And thought, okay, well, you know what? I've always loved film, television, stories. Always loved stories. I've been first reader my entire life. Even as a young kid, I read 10, 12 novels a year. Loved fiction and literature in general. And so I think, okay, well, I'm not doing that well in my business studies at Loyola. International business, I think, was my declared major early on. And, there's a top film school up the street. It's called Towson University, local.
Mhm. Sure.
Local public school. I'm like, all right, well, why don't I just, since I'm still trying to get my head on, why don't I transfer there and maybe I'll study some film and television, see how it goes. And I wound up graduating there for my undergrad. Eventually going to get my master's at Hopkins.
Where did you get your master's in?
So my undergrad was in comms, communications,
Yeah.
and my master's was in writing. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so Hopkins, that's one of the better writing programs in the country. So I wound up going to get my master's there.
Well, you got your act together.
Eventually, yes.
Not horrible.
Yeah, eventually. No, I graduated, undergrad, magna cum laude, and I'm pretty sure I got a 4.0 in grad school. I don't remember ever getting a B. So like it comes with time, and also when you find things you're really interested in and can pour your passion into.
And you're still with your wife.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
And while I'm in undergrad, I start to do the kind of work that would eventually lead me to one of my many, many professional journeys, which is that I start producing film and TV. So I get together I was working on any commercial that would take me.
right.
Drive to New York for a weekend, be a PA, or I work on a music video.
You're just trying to get
Yeah,
experience.
just anything I could do.
Understand.
To be PA is like a production assistant, right? Like anything I could do to be on the set, really. And I run into a young guy who's making some interesting films, and he notices that I'm good at organization, and I'm good at understanding what it takes to put together a production. And he pulls me aside and says, and we happen to be paired in a project. And after that project, I directed that project. And he's like, he was kind of nice, but he's like, look, I'll be honest, I don't think you're a great director, but I think you're a great producer. And
what a great compliment.
yeah, no, it really was. And funny enough, he went on to be, and is right now, a very, very famous director.
Oh, interesting.
In the kind of horror thriller genre.
Okay.
Yeah. So his name is Mike Flanagan. He produces a lot of content. Had an all-around creative deal with Netflix, and now has one with Amazon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's done a lot of Stephen King remakes.
Huh.
Look him up. He did the Shining sequel for Warner Brothers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So wonderfully talented person. But back in the day, we were just young guys who saw some complementary skills in each other.
Swapped roles.
And we started getting together. Yeah, that's exactly right. Actually, we started getting together to make films. We wound up, we were living at the time where you were editing on a Steinbeck, which is a machine where you would actually slice a piece of film,
Sure.
and tape it together with a piece of tape, and then on weekends we were in the Media 100 room or in the Avid room doing the first nonlinear editing at that time when things were transitioning from analog to digital.
Oh, wow. What
Yeah.
an interesting period.
Yeah, such a cool. You, as someone who likes media, you would have. I think you would have enjoyed it. Really, it was really great times. Really great times, and learning about compression, the compression technology, and all that stuff. It was a blast, which ultimately led me to technology work later. But at that time, that's how I got involved in film and TV. We made the first digital feature-length film that was in the Maryland Film Festival ever in 2001. And we both, we wound up making 2 movies together and a bunch of television shows together
Wow, that's exciting.
as I got out of school.
So it sounds like your mom's organizational skills really rubbed off on you, which is good.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, she, again, she kept a tidy home and scheduled chores and knew exactly when those kind of things needed to be done, and I think that did help me a lot.
So when you decide to go to college, was that one of the first times, and then you're doing all the work on the side? Is that one of the first times where you didn't feel different? Because now you're out in the world, and
Yeah.
you're not in your home every day trying to balance.
Yeah, I don't have. Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't have to do that. I don't have to balance these two worlds. And in college, there are many more people like me. Again, they may look slightly different than me.
Right.
And their origins may be from different places on the map. But at the end of the day, many of us have a very similar story, right? In college, you'll find a lot of first generation folks.
And that's
that
what
are-
I
that are
found when I got to college. I started to realize there were a lot of people who weren't like me, that they were like the Americans from home. But there was this comfort, even from not really first generation Americans, but I went to school at Michigan. There were a lot of factory worker families.
Yeah.
And that blue collar, like down to earth mentality was something I just felt so comfortable with.
Right.
And actually, when I first got a job on Wall Street wearing a suit, I mean, that's sort of like the whole dream. It just made my stomach turn. Like I've never felt comfortable being that persona, and always felt more comfortable with the people that are, on the ground. My dad was an electrical contractor. You tend to gravitate toward that comfortability, and you could find more of it once you're sort of in that world.
Yeah. I felt like, again, I was surrounded by a bunch of people like me. Most people had not most, but a good selection had a first generation story.
I'm curious, especially since you speak Spanish, did that become useful?
Not really.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, not in college, really. And I don't know if it's because.
Well, what about the media world and the film world? Not so much.
Yes, no, that was more useful, right? Especially depending on some of the staff or vendors you might be dealing with, that kind of stuff, right? So I think college became, funny enough, and I forgot to mention this, or Spanish became, pardon me, important in college, really in my work life. So because I didn't have any resources like many people did, I came from, the origins we've just discussed. It's not like I had a bunch of money, I had to borrow everything I used to pay for college and or earn it while I was doing it. So I worked 40 hours a week every year of college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I wound up getting a job. I got lucky and wound up getting a job at a place called Visa International, like the credit card company. They had a call center in Baltimore. And they needed people who spoke different languages because we provided service to cardholders around the world that lost their card, or they just got robbed, and their cards are stolen. They need replacement cards. They need cash. So I wound up developing professional skills and using my Spanish.
That's unbelievable.
By working nights at a 24-hour call center. And that's where really my Spanish actually got quite good. I mean, I had home Spanish, right?
No, but this is business.
This is business Spanish, right? So I'm talking to banks and routing wires and right, exactly. I remember at one point, I think I could say something like, welcome to, thanks for calling Visa International. Please hold on, in like 7 different languages.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because we helped in Portuguese, we helped Japanese, really. We had all sorts of languages on the floor. And so that was a pretty cool experience because I got to work with people from all over the world, many of which either were immigrants themselves or definitely had a first generation story. They had learned a language from a mom or a grandmom. and it got them this job. And I love that experience. That was a
Talk
great
about
experience.
harnessing where you came from and turning it into positivity, where you're using that to sort of fund your education.
Yeah, and I was, I was in college making more than my mom or dad had ever made in their entire lives.
Yeah,
You know,
I actually remember.
not that that's a measure of anything, except for that it helped me out then. But yeah,
But it's a measure for them. Where I remember the first year I made more money than I thought my dad made at that time. And I called him and I was like, I was so happy from the sense of, you're not going to have to worry about me.
Yeah.
And, you got me to this point. I'm actually going to be okay.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think he was ever worried about that, but I was.
Right. No, right.
Because I always felt that I don't have a safety net.
Yeah.
So I better figure it out.
I think when you're a first generation person, or you came here at a very young age, and you watch your parents do what they have to do, and many times that involves struggle.
Yep.
To make it work for you. I think the mentality you just described is exactly what you hold on to for a long, long period of time.
I don't think I've ever let it go.
Yeah,
There's
for a long, long period.
There's a crazy part of me that, feels that at any given moment it could just all go away.
Yeah.
And it's just, my wife has a very, very good perspective, because I have that fear all the time, where she's like, you have your family, you have love, and those are the things that are the most important. And I wish I could actually be more like that.
Yeah.
And not worry about everything blowing up at any given moment.
Yeah. It's I think I still worry about it a little bit. It hasn't been with me as strong as it was when I was in my 20s and 30s, and I was trying to go to life, experiencing success, also experiencing challenge. Right? Oh, great, awesome job. Just lost that job, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right? I think that for me, I won't speak for everyone who has this kind of journey, but maybe you'll find this. Maybe this will ring a bell. The family, having the family and being grateful for that, and that those are the most important things. That's all great when you feel like you've had all the basics covered.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have had a past where all the basics were not assumed to be covered every
Like
week or
food.
month, yeah, right, or someone else was covering part of your rent, part
Right.
of your food, and you knew that, right? You at some point you got old enough to realize that the whole package really does become important, and
Yeah.
does become a sign of maybe you've broken out of that cycle, because some generations stay in that cycle.
Oh yeah,
Forever.
Multiples of generations.
Yeah. So that it's not about pride. It's just about thinking like, for now, we're out of that. We're off that hamster wheel for now. But you just never know when it'll come back. I do have that feeling, like, there are those stories about people that survived the Holocaust, and where they used to hide money, and how they had their own trauma, identity, and experience. What they thought about escape plans, the importance of having an escape plan, even 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years after the events that traumatized them.
Yeah.
My wife's grandfather used to hide money in the freezer. They'd find
Coffee jars.
Yeah, they'd find, money all over the place when his name was Moses, when he passed away, like all over the house, because he'd been a prisoner of war. And he's got a crazy story. Maybe one day we'll get into that. But he made his way here eventually, and just never left that mentality.
Yeah.
That mentality never left.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't necessarily worry about my kids, not because I'll leave them stuff behind or whatever it is. I feel like I've left them with the skills to sort of figure it out. Like, if they've got an education, the one equation we talk about all the time is, if you do what you're passionate about, everything else follows. Happiness, joy, money, whatever.
I gotta say, I say the same thing to my kids. I do the exact same thing. Find your joy and build your life around it.
But I think part of it is that was part of your journey, right? Like, you found film and media. Like, I'm going to dive 1,000% into that, because if I do, I'll immerse myself, And that's my way through this. And it's my way to give myself some stability.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was part of it for sure. But I also always had that thing on my shoulder.
Right.
It says to me, like, what's the big opportunity? How could you actually break your generations out of it? How could you break your generations out of this?
Right.
So it's funny because it's a luxury to be able to tell your kids. It's a luxury I did not have.
Yeah.
No one ever said to me, find your joy and build your life around it. Right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's an absolute luxury to be able to tell my kids that. And for the most part, believe that they could do that they can do that. I think
you're right. That's a big difference for me. Is I wholeheartedly believe that they can do that.
Yeah. So I mostly believe it. And it's not about my belief in them or their ability. It's actually just about the final unknown piece of the world.
Well, that's the part that we can't control.
Right. Yeah. And I know I can't. And so I don't spend time thinking about it, but I acknowledge its
there.
Presence there.
It's there.
Right. Right.
I mean, I know you've done a lot of stuff with AI, and it's probably the most transformative, disruptive technology that's out there.
And probably the most dangerous and the most overhyped and the most not overhyped.
But yeah, it's all those things.
Yeah. 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 It's a brilliant opportunity. It's a lot. I mean, look, I love the technology. So there's a lot there. My intersection with it has been mostly around being an amateur researcher in the space and trying to come at it from a theologian's perspective, right?
So before we go there,
yeah.
We're definitely going to come back to that.
Sure.
I really want to get into a little bit about some of the rest of your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure.
And then really want to talk about how you decided to become a rabbi and ultimately your family.
Sure. So we left off. I was getting out of college, right? Did film work, and I was working on sets. I was working with my partner, Mike, on different things, and that led me out of college the first few years of my career. At the same time, we learned, as I said, kind of this nonlinear revolution in editing, where everything was now being digitized, and we were doing all the editing in a nonlinear fashion, which means you can move everything around, right, and that kind of thing within the computer, within the digital realm. And I got an opportunity to work for a company that specialized in digital content creation, that did some work in the compression space.
Okay.
So it's a big, in technology, it's a big deal to try to figure out how to, especially when it comes to files, how to move them as efficiently as possible. And so that means you want to make them as small as possible.
Sure. We take for granted you could download an entire movie.
Exactly. Right. That's right. The things that we could do now, right, would have taken us literally years,
right?
In the technology of the past to ever get onto your home, if you could ever get it at all. God, I remember having the first Roku box, if you remember those things. And every 2 minutes was like a buffer every 2 minutes. So that was a cool experience. That really was the first time that I had seen a start. Every film is a startup, kind of.
Sure.
You raise money in the beginning. You have a vision for a product, in this case, a film or a TV series or whatever. You sell it to some investors. Everybody goes and plays their parts, and hopefully at the end you sell it and get it distributed, et cetera. So it's that kind of a journey to it. But this was the first time I had been involved with something that involved that love of filmmaking, storytelling. That was the product it created, but also that had these, technology areas, compression, delivery. This company was also focused on how you would deliver digital content to multiple, broadcasters around the country. What's called UGC, user-generated content. So part of our model was figuring out how to work with creators. What
year was this?
So I just came back from Europe. I took a small break and went to Europe. So this was like 2004, 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So I graduated in the late 90s, and worked in film and television really right until that point, 2004. And then worked for this company. And it was still film and television, but I made the transition from being an independent producer, where I was producing movies and then eventually TV for, ESPN 5 Sportsnet, Discovery Channel, those kind of things, and delivering those products through an independent company, where now I was on the payroll, right, for a company, for a production company that had these other technological aspects to it. And so we dealt with what we now call creators, right? The creator economy. But back then we just called it user-generated content because no one knew.
Yeah, it's just funny that that's what the term was.
Yeah. We just knew that all of a sudden cameras were cheaper. No one had to deal with physical media anymore.
Yeah, this is way before YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube didn't even get sold to Google until, if I remember correctly, 2007, maybe.
Right.
Six or
So, I mean,
so it was
maybe a little bit, but not.
yeah, but YouTube grows like this, right?
Yeah,
You got to remember, like they're God, if I remember correctly, YouTube started this platform for sharing. God, what were those guys doing? It's like it wasn't even about. It had nothing to do with sharing your your home videos or no. It was a dating app. It was an early dating platform where you would shoot a video of yourself and like create a profile of yourself. That's why it was called YouTube, right? Yeah. So anyway, but so in that era, I was working in these new technologies, new kinds of content, and this company I worked for raised about $15 million, right, over 3 rounds to do this work. So that was my first bite of the startup apple,
right?
And man, I was hooked. As many people were back.
It's exciting.
You're disrupting things. You're creating new things. You're not afraid to experiment. You're not afraid to fail. It's encouraged, really, right? To have a high risk tolerance.
And you were doing all of that living where?
I'm still living in Baltimore. So I become, at that point, because I had some decent experience behind and in front of the camera, I became what's called the district production manager. So I ran the entire Mid-Atlantic for this company.
Oh, wow. What was the name of the company?
Zoom.
Oh.
Yeah, but not that Zoom.
Oh, different Zoom.
Yeah. So so they had, at the same time, it's like, I can't remember if like Al Gore was one of their backers, but it was a community of smart minds, smart money,
right?
Seeing trend lines and disruptive change moments in an industry, specifically in this case, broadcasting media, right? Content creation and delivery. So it was great. It was a cool little journey. And so I did that for a few years, and I got a call from a friend who had made a fortune in bioscience. His family had. He was about 10 years older than me. And we've been connected through George Circles and others. And he knew that I was in the creative field. And, he liked my work and my style. And he said, come, we're going to do this thing. I'm going to start this ice cream company. You're going to help me build it. And you can be the creative director. I said, okay, sure, why not? So again, like that, I'm always looking for like the next interesting thing. And so that's how I got into startups in food and beverage. So I did.
So what was the name of that company?
That was called Lee's Ice Cream.
Okay.
Yeah. So eventually Lee's gets built and that gets sold, which is great. And then while I was at Lee's, and I was a creative director and marketing director, so I did all the packaging and messaging and that kind of stuff. So
it's so interesting that you take. I mean, it all goes back to your communications.
It really does. I tell people that everything goes back to stories.
Yeah.
At the end of it, I just love transmitting stories.
Yeah.
I love what stories mean to us. I think it's why I become a rabbi ultimately, which I'm sure we'll get to. But the power of stories is why I do everything.
It's actually why I do this. It's helping people tell this story in particular. What is their journey of being a first generation American and how it shaped who they actually are?
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. Everyone who I interview really calls it a project. I never actually thought of it as a project, but every single person has said that.
Right.
And I guess that's really what it is. And ultimately, the themes that come across are so unbelievably similar.
Right.
And there's some of these incredibly positive stories, and then there are some really rough stories. But ultimately, it all comes from where you started and really where your family started.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. It's true. I mean, so, there's not a journey I've had that isn't deeply influenced by my childhood identity, my experience, what I saw around me, what I knew I wanted, what I knew I didn't want.
Right.
Like those things absolutely drive everything. Like for all of us, I think. But the first generation immigrant story, I guess, is a particular iteration on that theme.
Yeah, it's one of those things that for me, most people don't know I'm first generation American. And that's what sort of piqued my interest. It's like, what do you mean? How is it that you don't know that? Like I wake up every day knowing that's who I am.
Yeah. But it's amazing that within a lifetime that someone can go from holding strangeness, otherness, to being completely accepted in a society.
Yeah.
Right. And I think people say that America is one of the few that can still happen regularly. I'm not sure. I think it's more widely spread than we think, but
I think that's right.
but America takes that under its, loves to brag about that, right? That's
Well, we hope that continues.
well, I hope so too. God. So anyway, so I learned how to code because I helped build a website
Boy.
at that ice cream company. I learned just a little bit of HTML enough to be dangerous and build a website, and then I had seen. I mean, again, I worked with the company that did depression technology and digital delivery stuff, so I knew I liked tech. I built, as I mentioned earlier, I've been into computers from the time that they became something affordable and reasonable that I could actually have in my home. I really wasn't until high school, but so then I got into them and understanding how they work and taking them apart, putting it back together. So these kind of threads, different threads, disparate threads, have always followed me around in my life, and eventually I find some way to twist them together in some incarnation or other, some opportunity or other. And so I learned this coding stuff, and then I go and I get a call from my uncle. My I know it's weird. My
You get a lot of opportune calls.
No, I do. I get a call from my uncle. And sadly, he's passed away now. My father's brother, who was one of the positive influences in my life from that circle, from my paternal side, in that relationship. He's been very successful. Been part of the engineering team that made one of the first mobile calls ever in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Worked on technology as well. He'd done very well for himself. And he'd been kind of keeping track of me over the years. And we had kept a relationship going. And he said, there are these guys working on this tech startup. I think they need somebody creative. I think they need somebody who knows marketing. I think you've got an eye for technology. I can feel it in you because we'd had discussions in the past about it. Why don't you go meet this guy? Sure, I'll go meet the guy. So I go meet the guy, and he tells me about this piece of software that they're building. So this was back in the days before, essentially they were bookmarks, you bookmark a website. They were part of your browser, but they sucked as a service. Like the product itself was horrible.
Right.
It wasn't very good at bookmarking the browser. So there were other third-party services. Delicious was one of them, and there's a Stumbler, a whole bunch of sites that would help you aggregate, collect, curate content. And he said, "Look, we're good at the back end. We suck at the front end. We need help in design. We need help in messaging. We need help in demoing, right? Like the story, right?
Yeah.
We need help in presenting for demos and fundraising.
We've got a great product, but
we got a great product, but we don't
know how to
communicate
package it and sell it.
That's it. Which is, by the way, what got me into Judaism. But and so I said, okay, yeah, no, I can use it. And I looked at the product. I thought it had some legs. Interesting. I studied the space for a little while. I came back and said, okay, I think I can help you do this. So the product was called Notemark, and it was a precursor to Pinterest, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
So it was back in the day when people were still just bookmarking actual links, and that was the currency. This was a product that could clip any sort of HTML content, including images.
Oh, almost like Evernote.
Yeah, that kind of thing, like an early Evernote. You got it, exactly. So it could clip anything you wanted. It could put it into our platform system. That would then, you could set a reminder on it. You could set action points on it. You could add it to a larger board of collages of image that you thought, were curated by theme or whatever. And so, we raised $3.5 million over the course of my time with that company to build it and grow it. We eventually wound up in the top 100 of a show called the TechCrunch 40. TechCrunch is a very big corporate. So it was their inaugural conference called the TechCrunch 40 conference. And out of 1,500 entries from 150 countries, we were in the top 100.
Wow.
So we were thrilled. It was great. So that started getting me out to San Jose more often and out to Silicon Valley, where I would pitch to Yahoo about, hey, we should make a Notemark for Yahoo.
Right.
Do this for AOL. So I got to go to these big headquarters and pitch strategic partnerships, and sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. In the end, the product had some critical mass, had over 100,000 users, but stuff didn't quite work out the way we hoped. But it was yet another wonderful experience in startup culture, right? Which I think there are a couple of themes that have stayed with me forever in startup culture, which is what, in any particular segment of society or sector or industry, what's the status quo? Why isn't it good enough? Who's looking to change it? What are they doing? Is there an infrastructure to support it? That change and that disruption, hopefully positive disruption. And like I started to study the cycle of that disruption,
Right.
right? And I was kind of convinced that organizations that want to stay healthy or sectors that want to stay healthy actually have to continually build an infrastructure for that kind of disruption, that kind of creative upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise everything just gets old and stale and status quo. Nobody expects anything different.
I don't think it just relates to technology.
It doesn't. No, that's what I'm
It's
saying. It's anything. That's why I said
what
earlier.
a lot of people fail to
Yep.
understand
Yep.
is if you are an entrepreneur that runs a company, if you are not reinventing yourself every single day, you are yesterday's news.
Yeah.
If you're not adapting and technology makes that even more overwhelming where that's now
Right. It's 10x magnified, right?
Exactly.
I happen to be in that space. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, right? That organizations of all kinds, sectors and segments of all kinds reach a maturity point where the bureaucracy is as much as it can be. The bad decision making is as high as it can get, right? Like the dysfunctional nature of what's considered best practice in the space is as dysfunctional as it can get. And it needs to be shaken up. It
Right.
needs to be shaken up. And for its own good, it should create that ecosystem internally. But most don't. But so I'm kind of like, those lessons I carried out of my startup experience and life. And, got to do some really interesting things and some other journeys, which, aren't worth necessarily talking about outside of the fact that they continued to teach me that kind of thinking was valuable.
Yeah.
What I didn't mention is that in all these years, I'm taking this other journey on the side, which is that I'm not officially Jewish, but from the time I'm 16, I'm building the computer labs in the shul. I'm, becoming part of the community. I become the guy who's not Jewish, but sure acts Jewish.
Right.
And is hanging around the community.
I mean, this is actually going to be one thing I asked you is at what point did you actually convert?
Yeah.
Kind of becoming a rabbi.
Yeah.
Like you already adopted Judaism.
Yeah. So I very much, but since from the time I was 13, right, I knew that Judaism was something that was going to be part of my life and just kept going like this. And I really do become that guy, right? That's like not Jewish, but does everything Jewish.
But when do you marry your wife?
So I'm 26 and she's 24 when we married.
Oh, wow.
But I converted, earlier than that, and not for her.
So you converted earlier than that.
Yes.
Okay. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
For me.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with,
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yes. Yeah. So I'd already been on this journey. And there were moments back then, there were moments when no matter how unofficially Jewish you were, there are going to be gatekeepers at certain moments in life. And we lost someone that we loved very much. And I'd been a big part of her life and spent time with her and visited her. I was one of the last people she spoke to. Even when as she had a stroke, I was speaking to her.
Oh, wow.
And the whole family wanted me to be, part of that was honored to carry her to her final resting place. And to have that honor to put dirt on her coffin. And I wasn't given that honor because at that time her executor, which was totally fine. I hold no ill will, but it changed my life because I wasn't Jewish officially. So I couldn't act in those ways.
That was before you converted?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So in his mind, right, so that was one of those pivotal moments that said to me, okay, I do need to make this official for myself.
Yeah, that's a big moment.
Yeah, it was for me. It was really big because I knew that was one of a couple, but that was the one I'll share that was kind of like, okay, if I'm living this way anyway,
I don't want it to be denied.
Yeah, I don't want to be denied these things. I think thankfully today we don't live in a space anymore where people are going to wait for you meaning any third party organization or person, to award them some sort of status. Those days are over, which is why I think Judaism struggles because it loves being a gatekeeper, but it's best suited in modern times to being a door opener.
It's very interesting because my experience with that, my son spends a lot of time with Chabad, and I grew up with a very different perception and vision of Chabad, and it always shocks me that like he's that into it. But they are unbelievably inclusive. It is so mind-blowing to me because I associate them with the gatekeeper version.
Yeah.
And they completely change their tune. They'll take any thread of Judaism you'll give them and just try to pull it.
Their outreach model is strong. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's come here. We've got space for you. We've got food for you. We've got booze for you. We've got like
Make it fun.
We're going to make it fun. That's right. I mean, you got to give them credit, for
Yeah.
what they're doing. Now, look, I would say this is all respect to Chabad or any outreach models that are out there. Ultimately, you're hoping, right, that a certain percentage of the people that you
They latch on.
latch on and will become,
Or
deeper
even,
members.
exactly. So
Yeah.
even those that are Jewish get more deeply Jewish.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
More observant.
For sure, right? I don't know what their KPIs or metrics are, but I would imagine that that
seem to be doing all right.
some of that is there. They've done quite well, right? So, but yeah, so those feelings, along with just a continual journey, like I said, this upward trajectory within my Jewish confidence and Jewish self, allowed me to get to the point where I wanted to convert. So that was
You convert, before you're married in your mid-20s. Now let's catch back up to you're doing the technology gig, but you're about to talk about, I guess, your side journey,
so
your parallel
that journey. Yeah. So that technology gig is coming to an end, as I've just said, right? So we raised the money, we did some good things, had some good critical mass, but didn't quite make it to where we either got acquired or we're going to be able to continue to fund the working capital we needed to get to the next stage. And so at the same time, that journey that I'd been taking, it turned into some real interest where I'm taking classes at the Baltimore Hebrew Institute at night in different subjects to get more informed, both in Hebrew in general and other things specific, other topics around Jewish life in specific. I have a rabbi who's a good friend who we kind of study together and talk together a lot. So he becomes an important influence in my life. A few rabbis that fit that description at that stage in my life, in my early 20s, mid 20s. And so I'm looking around and going, I love Jewish life clearly. I love Jewish people clearly. I love the ideas I know of right now in Jewish life that are important to me and have stuck with me: family and community and building a better world, and fixing a broken world. And I have this set of skills, and I'm at a juncture point in my life, right? Is this something I could do? Is this something I should even think about, right? Because then I can take this thing I'm doing on the side in the night and turn it into something I do,
right?
Do like every day. And so I go speak to a couple of the rabbis that are mentors and friends, and they encourage me wholeheartedly to take a shot at doing this.
Well, I mean, when you have a journalism degree and you're curious and you're passionate, and not journalism degree, but a
communications
degree.
Yeah.
And then your degree from Hopkins.
Yep.
And you have this passion for, all the virtues that, you align with.
Yeah. And I have a passion for stories.
Yeah.
Right. And I also see that Judaism sadly doesn't do itself justice. Like we said earlier, it's got great content, fantastic ideas, many of which never reach people. You could spend a lifetime in a synagogue and not touch on some of our greatest hits from an ideas perspective as a culture and civilization. And I didn't understand that either. Right. So along with the fact that I carried the challenges of knowing that more and more families were becoming mixed heritage families, that more and more people were going to be walking the road that I had walked, that I knew that communities were not set up to help them or serve them well, really in any way.
Right.
At that point, even Reform communities at that point. I had been a product of a conservative community, but still, right? Like in terms of my growing up Jewishly, I've been mostly in a conservative shul. So, so I also see the startup eye in me is looking at Judaism very carefully and going, maybe they could use a couple guys like me and a couple gals like me, right? Who are not going to get so stuck on the gatekeeping, are going to focus on the door opening, and are really going to care about communicating the way that, much like technology and storytelling, which I had been doing, mass media storytelling and technology, communicating in a way that can be accepted in this moment.
You sort of navigated your way to identify Reconstructionist Judaism as...
That was a long process. I actually called every seminary in pretty much, except for Orthodox seminary, and I called all the major movement seminary. And I couldn't, conservative and reform seminaries at that point, conservative for sure was not a fit, right? Like I couldn't, like many modern people in my life, is made up of a wonderful diversity of people. And I didn't see a welcome within in conservative.
Yeah, they struggle.
Yeah.
that.
for
identifier.
diversity of people. I mean, let's start with mixed heritage families, but honestly, the list goes on and on.
They've
So
gotten better.
they have gotten better.
They were part of a conservative synagogue in New York that was incredibly welcoming.
Yeah, for sure. There are definitely,
But they
you know,
acknowledge how
but the
difficult it was.
institutions of training,
Absolutely.
right, have certain even higher standards than that.
Yep.
And again, they were putting forth, and to some degree, Reform too, were putting forth that a Jewish leader, a rabbi, had to model a certain type of Jewish life. And then I would go out and live my normal life with my Jewish friends and not see anyone that had any remote interest in living that kind of life, like not even close,
Right.
to wanting to live that kind of life. And so again, I saw what I saw back in the startup days and what you can find in almost every entrenched, overly bureaucratic, overly mature organization that is stuck in anachronistic ways but can't see them, which is the population has left you far behind, your user base has left you far behind, and you're stuck on arguing over points that they have no investment.
Yeah, zero.
Yeah. So conservative reform quickly were on my radar and off of my radar. And one of the rabbis I told you from before happened to be a Reconstructionist rabbi, and I was having more and more conversations with them. And he said, you know what? Read Exploring Judaism, a Reconstructionist approach, and call a seminary. They have a weekend where if you're thinking about
Interesting.
coming to apply
in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, yeah. And that's how it happened. I read that book. I had more conversations with my friend, Rabbi Jason Klein, if he's out there. I mean, I know he's out there. He's a great rabbi in New York now. And, those conversations, when I read that book and understood the tenets of Reconstructionist Judaism, I said, oh, that's kind of what I am. Or within that space, I can make up the Jewish identity freely, creatively, that I need to make up to live my Jewish.
Right. Especially coming from, a non-Jewish home, yet you had a Jewish home in your community. Right. Having the open door, I would imagine, is a really important thing for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's why I named the first project to disrupt the Jewish world that I ever did, the Open Door Project. Now, I
didn't actually mean to plant that, but I'm glad I did.
That's what I tell people, right? Because I use the phrase Open Door DOR, right? The project was called the Open Door DOR,
right?
The Open Generation Project, right? But it's all about what I said earlier. I was a curious kid with no claim or no reason to be taken seriously by anyone. But kudos to conservative schools that are the outliers. A conservative school opened its heart to me and opened countless doors to me,
right,
along the way, right, and made it feel like I could take on this identity over time.
And so when did you go to the seminary?
So I go to the seminary starting in 2009, and I'm 31 at that time.
And so
we already have my wife and I already have a 1-year-old son and one on the way.
Okay. Yeah. So this is throwing caution to the wind of,
for sure,
I'm going to become a rabbi and leave the business world behind, and take it with me on this new journey. Yeah.
I mean, that was the goal. The goal was always, could I authentically be who I was and be a rabbi, right? And so much so that in my years at seminary, I was learning all the skills that you need to have to do this job, which I'm very grateful to have. But I was also hunting down all of any green shoot that would pop up on the Jewish landscape that looked like somebody was trying to do something different for God's sake, right? So I was constantly interested in, so at that time, and really until just recently, congregational life has mostly been in decline. Like in the last 10 to 15 years, the conservative movement has dropped off.
Yeah, it's a struggle to get people to come into.
Right. All the mergers and other, creative ways of keeping reform communities alive and come around. Only until recently have communities finally found, after COVID, communities have started to find some stability and even some growth in certain areas with certain conditions.
Right.
But back when I was in school, pretty much everything was flat or in decline. Right. And
you're still living in Baltimore.
I'm still living in Baltimore, commuting to Philly, 2-hour ride each way. And full-time student and working part-time.
And having 2 kids.
and having 2 young kids under 3. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was crazy life. It was crazy life. But one of the things I did during school was I'm gathering these skills. Gathering these skills is I'm making sure to keep those. What's working? Why is it working? And you're starting to see some trends. Well, you have creative, younger Jewish leaders who are saying, "I'm gonna do things dramatically different." You start to have people that are saying, "I'm actually not building a synagogue at all. I'm building another type of spiritual community. I'm going to build a meditation focused community. I'm going to build a storytelling focused community, right? Like in New York and other places. So there's a crop of early leaders there. I would say a rabbinic generation ahead of me, the Sharon Browses of the world that are building a car, and Ramamu in New York, and Lashel and all those places, right? They're starting to build models that people can feel are actually tangibly different,
Right.
to what the wider Jewish world has to offer. It's more attractive to younger Jewish families because of the creativity and diversity of experiences and lowercase s services that these communities provide. More people want to come because it's of the moment. It could actually compete with their regular social schedules and lives, right? Like for most people, if you have an opportunity to go to a book fair or a really interesting talk on Friday night, or you have the opportunity to go to a traditional Shabbat service, and you're 40, you're 30 to 50, and you've got 2 kids, what are you doing on a Friday night with your precious social time?
Right.
I mean, these are just things we have to talk about honestly, right? You're going to the book fair. Let's be honest. You're going to the talk. You're going to the thing that 5 other families that are same age peers as you are doing that night. So these communities were at least trying to meet those people where they were.
So you're at the seminary, and now at some point you're graduating. It's a 6-year.
Yeah, 5 to 6 years. I did 6 years because I had what's called a Mechina year, a special preparatory year, where I catch my Hebrew up to, because I wasn't like one of those valedictorians from Hebrew school. So mostly rabbinic programs have tended to attract, again, until probably the last decade or so, maybe 2. But before that, rabbinic programs tend to attract a very similar type of student. You were someone who's loved Judaism all your life, and who was perfectly happy in religious school, and learned Hebrew easily, or you came with Hebrew because you spoke it in the home, or you went to day school. You grew up in youth organizations of some kind or other. You then had your first professional experiences in Jewish life, if you even did any of that before coming to rabbinical school.
You didn't grow up.
I had none of that.
Right.
I had none of that.
But you did have a skill that a lot of people don't, even those that do learn Hebrew in day school, is that you did know another language.
Yes.
And the capability that your brain already had to learn a third language, your brain already understood how to learn.
Yes. I got lucky there, right? That my grandmother.
It certainly helped.
Yes. So once you know a gendered language, then it helps a lot to learn another gendered language.
Oh, interesting.
With similar patterns, and you have 2 sets of conjugation, right? So that's particularly helpful. I happen to have a pretty decent memory, so that helps. And because I was used to looking at data a lot.
Yeah.
Like I just recently finished some upskilling at MIT on data science, and so you just learn to spot patterns. And really, a language at the end of the day is kind of
Hebrew.
It's a code. It's a code with patterns in it.
That's exactly
right. Yeah. And so
I grew up with a rabbi, by the way, that was very into Hebrew numerology.
gematria. Yeah.
He was just he saw the matrix.
Right.
I mean, it was wild.
Yeah. There are those people that have that skill. That skill I don't quite have.
You'll get there.
But essentially, right. But that's the thing. It's really. I mean, all language is a code, right? Language is the operating system of humanity, right?
That's right.
So anyway, I had the ability to pick up a language. Though the extra year, I could have tried to test out, but the extra year was good for me.
Right.
And the school was great to me. They gave me, a half a ride to go, and which was awesome. And because I think I was amongst the first of a crop of people that was really quite different looking at rabbinical schools.
So where do you get placed at some point?
So I do all sorts of things. As you go through rabbinical school, you do internships, you do student rabbi positions. I do my share of all of that. You do summer, you visit certain pulpits in the summer and that kind of thing. All that stuff is great experiences, but really I kept my eye on the kind of the innovation nonprofit side. I never thought I'd go into the pulpit ever.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because what I had seen of pulpit life, though, was that the board politics are difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, funny enough, first job I take out of school is a pulpit rep. But because my
Where was that?
at Bethel, this shul in Baltimore that really I grew up.
Oh, okay.
Jewish, and so my father-in-law was the executive director there, but that had nothing to do with that. I was good friends with the rep, and his name's Steve, wonderful, wonderful man, and Steve and I talked about what I was going to do after school and that kind of thing, and conservative synagogues in his synagogue were realizing, he would have to turn down, he would have 4 or 5 calls a month from young people or members of 4th and 5th generational families in that community. That community was founded in 1948.
Wow.
And they were almost all mixed heritage weddings.
Oh, wow.
And he's a conservative rabbi. You have to turn them down.
Interesting.
And
So what was his?
So his thing to me was like, hey, you grew up in the community. People know you here. People trust you. You've taught here through rabbinical school. I would teach Parshat Shavuot classes. I was involved, volunteering and even working here and there. And I'd spent over a decade at that point in and amongst the community, around the community. Come here, you're a Reconstructionist rabbi. You can help with that. You can lead outreach work. You can do Havarah work for mixed heritage families. So lead a group of communities that is specifically made up of these mixed heritage
community within a community.
Exactly, kind of. But I also had a pulpit rotation. I gave sermons and led high holiday services and taught on the weekends and all the normal stuff that you do.
Right.
So there were 3 rabbis on staff.
Oh, wow. It's a huge synagogue.
1,800 families, yeah, big.
Wow, that's big.
And so it was a wonderful experience. I loved it. And I would still be there if it weren't for the fact that politics and boards change and things change. And eventually, the issue of me doing mixed heritage weddings became an issue at the board level.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was told that if I wanted to continue at the synagogue, I would have to
be
not do that work. And that was a non-starter for me, knowing
exactly
what my journey has been. So that's okay. I love my experience there. It's a wonderful place, a place I still inside my heart call home in many ways. I will always be grateful to Rabbi Steve Schwartz, who has been one of the lights in my life, for sure. Really, he taught me the fundamentals of being a rabbi.
Well, and working in a huge community.
That helps too.
You get thrown in one of the pitfalls.
Yeah, you get thrown in quick. Yeah. So great experience. So I come out of that and I wind up developing a friendship with a guy named David Siegelman, who heads up Moshe House, big international peer-to-peer informal Jewish education organization.
Mm-hmm.
And, they have this project that they want to do. It has no name at that point. But he's written a white paper and he says, I'm watching rabbis and cantors do really off-the-wall things. And I believe there should be an ecosystem to help them do them better. And I'm like, I put the hand up and I tell them about my experience and all the research I've done in rabbinical school and startups. And so that's how startup life and rabbinic life came together. And that's how the Open Door Project, DOR, was created, the Open Generation Project, to find and fund the country's most entrepreneurially creative rabbis and cantors who were building new and emerging models of Jewish spiritual life.
Oh, that's
that people were coming to in droves.
Interesting.
And that young people were coming to, right? So one of the big problems, of course, we have in organized religion in general is
how do you engage?
It's how do you keep the future generations, the ones that are going to eventually, sit on your boards and make sure you have longevity and pass off to the next generation. How do you keep that continuity, that flow of generations that you need flowing? And right now, many organizations and many communities, they have a big drought period, right?
Yeah.
Where, the story.
It's the gap of generation where you think you're in good shape and then all of a sudden, 15 years later, you realize, oh, we didn't backfill generationally. We've got a problem.
Yeah. So what I discovered in this project, because it was my job to do it, was how amazing creativity in Jewish life can be if you just unshackle it.
Yeah.
If you just say, stop trying to be a synagogue and be a Jewish community, whatever that means. There were arts, arts creative therapy studios in Berkeley where you were just as likely to come and paint or draw or write or sculpt that morning as you were to study Jewish text or chant or meditate in Jewish fashion. There were, communities that relied on spoken word performance and amazing eclectic musical power in Brooklyn. They were selling out the Brooklyn Bowl every year for electric guitar Yom Kippur, services and everything in between. And I got to speak to 250 rabbis over 3 years.
Well, it's
About
really
what they were
through the
built.
lens. You can do anything through any particular lens. And if you apply that through the Jewish life and the Jewish value, it's sort of amazing how broad that can be and accessible to so many people on a meaningful level.
Yeah.
Like Yom Kippur here, I did a sound meditation, and I've been meditating very regularly for well over a year. And for me, Yom Kippur is my favorite day. It is just you allow your body to physically drain, and then like that sound meditation was just such a good time of day. It was, typically I would take a nap.
Yeah.
And I actually was re-energized and that's not something in a conservative would have been available in a conservative.
Right. You're not going to walk into it.
Right.
Most conservatives in Anderson have a sound bath experience.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And so I didn't go home that day and take a nap. I stayed here and was able to immerse myself in that and truly had like a very energetic end to my day and felt amazing after that. And so it's little things like that that appeal to different people. And there were multiple things that were going on that day. So let's talk about family life a little bit on how being first generation American, you've tried to pass along certain things that were part of your life to your kids. Your kids are now in that 11 to 13,
15 and 17.
15 and 17.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
We're in it. We're in the teenage years. Yeah.
You're in it. It doesn't get better when they get older, by the way. It just changes.
Yeah, right.
So
You're scaring me a little, Jeff, but okay, I'll take it.
I'm coming from a day where
I hear that.
so walk me through how you've tried to, impart some of the things that you grew up with to your kids.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think in a lot of ways, my journey of being a parent has been to create a very different environment than I grew up with. Like that's kind of been my guiding philosophy.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm shedding the things that make me who I am. So we spoke Spanish in the home. I spoke to the boys only in Spanish till they were 6 and 8, exclusively. And so they had some quite decent
Your wife
Spanish.
speak Spanish?
No, but so she spoke English, but I only interacted with them in Spanish. But once you get into the school years, it's pretty tough. As anyone who's tried to pass on language will tell you.
Very hard.
Yeah. As soon as that all English immersive environment of school kicks in, and your kids know, of course, that you can communicate in that language as well, they're going to very rapidly switch at any moment they can,
right?
To try to speak to you in English as opposed to Spanish or Hebrew or whatever the language is they share. So that, though I tried very hard, that went by the wayside. Both my kids still understand Spanish completely. My older son, has got his grammatical challenges and whatever vocabulary challenges sometimes, but he speaks, fairly well.
But it sounds like from a heritage standpoint, that was a really important thing.
The language is very important to me. The language, besides the fact that it's the second most spoken language in the world, and for all other reasons, but for the sake of my grandmother and my mother, and ultimately what I came to see as a great value, especially once I got that job I told you about in college, and Spanish really developed itself, and I was able to meet people from all over the world. Just the value of knowing multiple languages became a big value for me.
Right.
And how I've been blessed to have that. I didn't always think that in my life, right?
It's one of the first generation superpowers.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. But when you're young, right? Like there are moments where
Resent it.
you resent it. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. And like we talked about, it's
Like if your mother's talking to you in Spanish in front of your friends,
that's right.
it's a huge no-no.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the things that makes you feel like uncomfortable, right?
Right.
So and that points out your difference in a very concrete way.
Usually if they're speaking to you in their language in front of your friends,
I'm
you're
in
probably
trouble.
not doing
Yeah, I'm in trouble. Yeah, for sure. That's so funny. Absolutely. So yeah, so language. We worked on the language in terms of passing things on. I was very fortunate or we were as a family in the early years of our child rearing years, to have my mom close. We were still in
Right.
Baltimore, as I was in Rabbinical school and all that. So she was there, cooking dishes from our culture, beans and rice and black bean soup, and all sorts of other dishes. Those are the two that just come to mind. That are some of my favorite, that have been recipes that have been in the family for a while, and so that was great. So we got a little bit of cuisine. Also, the kids going to my mother's house, going to my uncle and aunt's house, having exposure to the Latin side of the family was great. Also, so I think those are the ways which keep the language alive, bring the culture into the house as much as possible, and take the kids out to the culture as much as we could, and still live the modern life that we need to live, and balance it the way we needed to.
Well, it's sort of interesting because now you've been in California, I guess, for 10 years.
Yeah.
We need to fill in the blank of how you got here, but the accessibility to Spanish speaking and Spanish culture and Spanish food is much easier here.
Much easier. Much easier. Yes, yes. And just to fill
On
in
a good taco joint in Baltimore, it's a little hard.
Yeah, very hard, very hard. Yes. So to fill in that blank, the Open Door project that I mentioned, that's the job that got me out here. So
interesting.
Moisha House has a headquarters in Encinitas, California.
Okay.
That's where I live today. I live in a little town called Cardiff by the Sea. It's the south end of Encinitas.
So you continue to work on that project?
Yes. So I continue to work on that project. And
that's your technical full-time job?
Well, that's what I did for, whatever it was, 4 years. And then COVID hit. I did some, because I had been doing this work in leading edge Jewish organizations and what they do and how they prosper. And so I got into doing theory of change work and counseling work for communities and all kinds of stuff in a consulting role. Then I worked on another nonprofit, which was a blend of my technology background in Judaism, where I created I helped create and grow a platform for essentially for unbanked and underbanked people within the Jewish diaspora. So think of it like a GoFundMe or a Kiva, but especially for the Jewish world.
Huh. That's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I spent another 4 years building.
Because a lot of the stories you hear of people coming over, it's funded by so much of that, where in the 50s and the 40s, I mean, that's sort of how, it's actually how my dad got to Israel.
Okay.
Was organizations that funded, he was in Poland, they basically took everything away, and they were stuck in Italy for a year before they finally got played.
Right.
It requires
collectively funded those projects.
So you live in a building with all these people.
So similar in the collective funding aspects, for sure. But this is kind of like the crowdfunding platform model, the modern day model of that, where those folks aren't necessarily looking for their next immigration journey, but they're looking for their next step up in life, and don't either have the credit or the resources or banking. So like we helped Jewish communities in Uganda and Colombia and the United States and Dominican Republic and Israel and all sorts of places, right? So that was fun, because I got to put my old software skill
and apply it
to the Jewish world. Yeah, so that was fun as well. Yeah, but so in terms of back to your question about family, we did the best we could in terms of bringing some of the Latin cultural aspects to the family, but we're a fully Jewish family also, of course, and so we did a lot of, Judaism's always been a huge part of our life and our home. Less so as my boys have gotten into their teenage years and are now making their own choices.
Right.
So much like any family, rabbinic families are a different reality.
You've got a teenage.
Yeah, so after their bar mitzvah, my boys, their interest level went way down. Their schedules went way up in terms of busyness and sports and other opportunities, academic and otherwise, that they have. And so, like any family, you fight to figure out where can you get the things you care about inserted. Jewish ideas are no similar. Unlike, though, many Jewish families, because I came from where I came from, had the road that I've had, walked the road that I've walked, I could never see myself forcing my child to take on a Jewish identity.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work anyway,
So
but I could never see it.
So what I've realized
Yeah.
is that the only thing you can do is plant the seed.
Yeah.
And
Totally agree.
when you plant the seeds, you just pray really hard that at some point they blossom. And with my middle son, who really felt to us the most disconnected to Judaism, today he's by far the most connected. And what made that connection for him was when he actually went to Israel. He went to TVT. On that trip, it opened his eyes. He's like, wait a minute, being Jewish is so much bigger than going to temple.
Yeah.
It is who I am and where I came from. And I have these grandparents that went through all this stuff for me to have a more comfortable life. And ultimately, he found his path,
Yeah.
which was that connection. And then now he is involved with Chabad. Or like, I'll take whatever it is, and he's embraced it, but he reps the film every day. Thanks.
And that's
None of those things are ever what I would have expected.
right. And I can't agree with you more in terms of your approach. I think it's hard to get the wider Jewish world to accept that really is probably about all you can ask for, which is if you can build positive feelings associated with Jewish identity, then that's about the best win you've got.
And at some point, you need to just disconnect and just hope it works.
This idea, right? So like what the data really proves, right? It's like if you drag kids through a religious school experience that they associate negativity with, you almost guarantee that you've lost them for the next 15 years, probably minimum. Right. And then if they ever come back at all, they're going to carry that negativity with them. Right. If you, for instance, that's why camp experiences are the complete opposite. When you provide an immersive experience that is led by fun, led by experience, led by social relationships, and then you layer a Jewish framework into that experience, you build almost lifelong positive association with Jewish identity. The data is absolutely clear on this.
So without even trying, like our younger son, who's 14, he's been to Camp Ramah, I think, twice now, because some of his friends were going, and some of his friends come from immigrant families. And so that's actually made my life a lot easier. I can connect with them. And he's like, oh, my friends are going to Camp Ramah. And I was like, I was stunned he wanted to go.
Yeah.
And he just totally embraced it. Like he would go all summer if he could.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. That stunned me.
That model
clearly works.
It clearly works, and it's what we need in Jewish communal life.
Yeah.
It's what really, if you look at
the family.
If you look at all those communities I told you about that were growing when others were shrinking, where we're getting people to come, right?
I'm really interested to dive in.
Yeah, it's about like, can we lead with experiences that people really find value? Can we lead with that? Can we do what we would call in software human-centered design? Right? Talk to people about what they want, what they need. Lead with the experiences in lowercase s services that they really desire in their life, that a synagogue or a community, forget a synagogue, that a community can step up into. And can we not constantly lead with our Jewish agendas, but let the people we serve define the agenda?
No, I think it's a very exciting time. And I love the intersection of technology and, and Judaism. It's an incredible journey.
Yeah.
There's not anyone who I think has probably had even remotely close to the journey you've had.
Well, I certainly have had an interesting one and potentially a unique one. And, but, more than that, it's just informed the way I do Jewish life, right? So there are many over the years I've, led little kind of like organic Habarot family experiences as my kids were growing up. There were other Jewish parents that, were part of a community but wanted to have some sort of Jewish life or were interested in Jewish education for their kids or experiences. For the most part, what we spent time doing is, having honey and date and chocolate tastings on Rosh Hashanah because you actually wanted to go to that.
Right.
Doing a hike on Yom Kippur because you actually wanted to go to that.
Right.
Or it's okay to say that some of our ritual technology is now anachronistic.
Look, we went to a Passover Seder through Chabad in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an unbelievable experience. You know, to be in a foreign country, it was late, it was accessible, it was interactive, it was traditional, but in some way it was like in this historic building. Like, the whole thing was just inviting. And, you know, when you walked in, it was a very professional, like well catered, and the service. And you're just like, wow, like this is amazing. And we're having amazing Italian Jewish food for a Seder,
Right.
you know, it's so I think heading in that direction of making it personally accessible to people.
Absolutely. I hope that's what we'll do at University of Synagogue, you know, far into the future.
Thanks for listening to the First Gen American podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Feel free to leave your comment and make sure to smash the subscribe button.